and it's killing me.
Here we are, just Jordan and I would say just the way I like it, but the good lovelies were lovely to talk to and had some great questions. Now, when we last spoke 5 years ago, a show called The Smartass Associates, it was a different world in many ways, but especially for cannabis. It wasn't quite legal yet, but it was on the horizon. Now it's been legal for coming up on 3 years, I guess. How would you describe this first few years of legality for the cannabis industry?
I'd say it's been a rocky road in some ways because, expectations were through the roof, and we actually had to change a lot, to get all of these laws past the political agreement phase and into actual implementation. And when you start to think about that type of stuff, you're talking about big complex regulations that stretch across the country, and not all of them are the same province to province. And so we've sort of been, in the thick of it, just trying to catch a stride for the last couple of years. And I think we're getting there, we're getting to a point where people that want our product are basically able to go out and get it, regardless of which part of the country they live in. And when I can say that without a bunch of asterisks popping up in my brain, then I think we'll be in a slightly better spot. So I think we're, good start, really exciting stuff still in the industry, but so much work still left to do, man. So much work left to do to get cannabis sort of legal, but also treated the way that it should be treated based on what it is. And I guess what I mean by that is public health around.
I'll do the questions here. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I guess what I mean by that is public health when it comes to anything is some balance of a bunch of different perspectives, and then you choose a path forward based on the actual impacts and the actual evidence. And when you look at, the cannabis drinks that we make and compare them directly to the closest thing that they are to, and that's alcohol, there's so many disconnects between how easy it is to get alcohol and how difficult it is to get, a cannabis drink, which is by every single measure a healthier, less addictive product. And if you put the two cans side by side, you'd get, I'm a big craft beer guy. I love it. This beard it screams IPA lover.
It does, but the shirt doesn't. We need to work on the shirt. That screams Twisty Shandy or something.
So we get you get this beautiful can that a graphic designer or some artist has put a lot of love into. You can get it ordered to your door. The town that I live in, the local brewery made me pick up 48 as a minimum to be able to deliver them to my door. And I was like, you know what? I love that.
Some sacrifices have to be made, yeah.
But then you look at drinks that have weed in them instead of alcohol, and the most you're legally allowed to buy at one time is 5 of them. And so if you're having, post-COVID world, right? You want to have a barbecue, try inviting some of your buddies over and having 5 beers.
5 beers ready.
See how that is in terms of, really, really adopting new consumers. And so we got some wrinkles we got to iron out, but largely I think we're in a good spot.
Now, when you were talking about the drinks, and by the way, you're launching, do I have this right? There's a Seth Rogen connected grapefruit cannabis beverage out there. So, I mean, I have a couple questions about that. I understand there might be some on the way for me in the mail. I've been led to believe by my friend Jordan. But how does that compare? You're saying it's, less addictive properties to it than an alcoholic beverage, but how much have you guys had a chance to test this on test markets, whoever they are, and focus groups, as to how it can be, accepted? Because I see why you would want it to be as widely accepted as craft beer or whatever you're drinking, in a nice summer day or whatever. But it's just entering the market, right? So is it a low THC concentration or what?
You got it. Yeah. So, I mean, it's the same. We're trying to mimic alcohol, right? Okay. So what we're trying to do is get the science to a point where it kicks in really quickly. So that when you take a traditional cannabis edible, usually kicks in 45 minutes later, an hour later. We want it to kick in more like 20 minutes after you consume it. So it's like drink a coffee, get the jolt from that coffee. Drink a beer, catch a little buzz. Same thing. We want to drink the cannabis drink and have essentially like one serving size of cannabis. So same as a glass of wine or a shot of whiskey or a pint of beer, we think that 2 milligrams is just about the sweet spot for a single serving. And so we've basically modeled it like that. If you want to have, one, you might get a little tingle. If you want to have 5, you'll probably change your mood quite a bit. And you can sort of choose what the occasion is, and then consume that many. So I guess like from there, what we're really trying to do is just tap into what people are already craving, right? Like a lot of people are, myself included, like a big sparkling water fanatic. And so the Seth Rogen one is called Host Plant. And it's basically sparkling water with a little hint of grapefruit and no cannabis taste, really. So it's, yeah,
Man, I was really hoping it was called Super Bad, but I can see from a marketing standpoint, not a lot of people would buy something called Super Bad. So I get it.
Right. When I went to school in Vienna, there was we were walking down the road one time, me and my sister, and they were like, "Hey, would you like to try a sample of this new beer that we just came up with?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah.
Looked at the can. It was called Blech. ECH. I was like, "Whoa."
Maybe it means something. Maybe it means something different over there. I don't know.
Maybe.
Now, are you? I'm going to ask a couple. Are you able to export your product anywhere aside from the challenges right now of any sort of exporting of anything? I mean, it has to be legal. Like, can you, for instance, ship your product to states where cannabis is legal or not, or is it blocked at the border?
The US, it's not federally legal yet. So you can go to Colorado and you can buy cannabis products, but there's no federal law. And so we can't ship there to consumers. But we did actually make one shipment that was overseen by the DEA to go to a research laboratory. So we're trying to get a little bit of capacity starting to get built up in the US. But you can't ship to consumers there just for federally legal purposes like research. But other countries, as long as there's a federal law on the receiving end of things, of course, yeah, you can ship product. It takes a little bit of paperwork, but we ship to Germany, we ship to Australia, we ship to the Caribbean. We've started doing that. I'd say way more since the last time we spoke. I'm trying to think exactly if we had ever done that the last time that you and I connected, but it's pretty new, the last couple of years.
Now, I'm backtracking a bit because we did talk about how there's different regulations in different parts of Canada, even. Yeah. And here in Ontario, there was a pretty popular joke going around how our premier lost millions of dollars on drug dealing when it's allegedly he's got some experience in that from his youth. So, all those challenges still occurring provincially? I know that hasn't been rolled out the same way, but are there roadblocks to you shipping your product within Canada to different provinces?
A little bit. I mean, a lot less than there is when you're trying to ship to another federal jurisdiction. Yeah. You're trying to cross some international border, but we still don't have a perfect system in Canada. I think, Doug Ford did the right thing. Like he actually took it away from being more like the LCBO and put it into the hands of small business owners. I think that's right up his alley politically. And we love that too, as a business. Sure. The timing of that decision, because of the election in Ontario from the Wynne government to the Ford government, it happened really late in the game. And so it's taken a little bit of time for them to catch up with other provinces. But they, to their credit, it actually is in a better spot now. I don't think a day goes by where I don't get some news alert about a new store opening up in Toronto or a new, small business that advances in the licensing process. So it's getting there. It's just taking some time.
And is our Canopy Growth products now available in dispensaries? Because we had talked 5 years ago, these dispensaries were not dealing in legal product. And so Tweed Inc., Canopy Growth was not dealing with them. Are your products available now in those dispensaries? Stores?
Yeah, so I mean, there are very few examples of people that used to operate in the gray market and now operate, completely legally. Like right. Those transitions have not been the norm. But there's a great one in Vancouver called the Village Bloomery, for example. We couldn't do business with them before legalization, and now they carry our products. And so there are some examples. It's more likely that a brand new business has opened a dispensary and we're now selling into them. But some transitions have happened.
And we don't try to pretend that we're not living in the time we're living in. The demand, from what I can hear on the streets, has gone up since the pandemic began. Could you speak to that a bit?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, the demand, the demand really shot up, and what we think was motivating that is that cannabis has not really been treated fairly, and I think people were probably trying to stock up because in the back of their mind they didn't think they were going to be able to have access for much longer. And so I think there was a real, almost like a run on the banks mentality, like get there while you still can. Now that it's been deemed an essential service in a lot of the provinces, we're starting to see that that spike is sort of tapered off, and we're back where we normally would have been. But it's almost a validator for everybody in the business that we went from having an illegal substance, and now it's being deemed essential in a pandemic in the matter of a couple of years. And I think that was a huge point of pride for the whole industry, was just that news that, man, like, okay, not only do we get the privilege, we get the nod to be able to still operate, we now have to do this responsibly because everyone's watching. And if we don't act like a mature industry here, we've got something to lose. And so we actually closed our stores down mid-March, pretty early. We have a couple guys on our IT team and our global security team that are former military. And so they were like, we got to get ahead of this. Like, we need systems, we need a pandemic response plan. So we were early on that stuff, closed the stores mid-March, and they were closed for about 2 weeks. In the 2 weeks, we figured out, a click and collect system. We figured out just how to keep our staff safe, how to keep our customers safe. And now they're all reopened, or almost all of them are reopened. And that really for us was, we're happy that we get to still, have business. We don't have to lay everybody off. But B, there's a massive amount of responsibility that comes with this, because if we don't do it right, as the industry leader, it's going to reflect on everybody.
And so we've talked about demand is up, and you guys are, hopefully ready for that. What about supply? Because that was the other big question, and I didn't quite understand the challenges with rollout, with supply issues. That yes, people want to have it, but there was some supply chain challenges. Can you talk to that a bit?
Yeah, I think largely behind us at this point. I mean, that we're at a point now where, the number of products that we're putting out is based on, that early consumer feedback. So it took a little while to put stuff out, see what people liked, react to that reality, because there were different consumer preferences between the medical patients that we were used to and rec patient or rec customers. And so when you get that kind of like instant feedback, you then have to plant all the plants. Those plants have to grow out. And then, get processed through. So there's a latency to our production cycles that are a little bit longer than what you would see in beer, for example, where it takes, 30 days to brew a batch. And if you get something that's crazy popular, it doesn't take you all that long to ramp up that specific batch. But with a plant, it's a little bit longer than that. So it took some time, to kind of like iron that out with kind of the latency of agriculture worked into it. But again, like not perfect, but way better than it was a year ago.
And what about where is it now with the launch of edibles? Are edibles now, you can legally produce and sell edibles? Because I think, there's a lot of people that were wondering about the respiratory issues associated with smoking or vaping. The edibles can directly address that. And, especially during people sometimes forget, a respiratory based pandemic might be a nice alternative to have an edible. Is that legally viable now?
Totally. Yeah. Like my wife is, I think, our biggest customer of cannabis chocolates. So our house is fully stocked. We got the drinks, we got chocolates, we got all kinds of stuff. And really, like what that shows is that the rollout, I mean, it started with a couple of forms of cannabis. You could have dried bud, you could have a couple of oils products, but now what we're starting to do is actually we're coming up with products that everybody wants. So we can drive people to the stores, because when they get there, they actually have the set of products that you want. It's not just, well, I have to keep going to my guy for chocolates and gummies, but then I go to this legal store for bud. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. I'm just going to keep going to my guy. But now that I think we've got everything that people want, it's a more compelling option to say, like, why don't you just go to the legal store? Like, you wouldn't say to somebody like, hey, do you want a new car, or do you want this black market car. Like, I don't think many people would just choose black market car when the other option is right there.
I mean, it depends on, customer loyalty, I guess, and comfort to a degree. But just so you know, Jordan, you are my guy. So it works out perfectly for me. It lines up. Now, I was reading up on a strain called Penelope that is balanced THC and CBD and might be more suitable for first-time users. So my question is, that just led me to believe, I mean, who gets to try these things for the first time to know what it's to know what it's like? Is there a cannabis sommelier, and how do I apply for that job, or how does one apply for that job?
So you're looking at you're looking at a guinea pig right now. When we
right now, did you take some before this started, or what? I didn't know we were doing that.
Oh man! So when you said let's do this on Monday, I said like I probably will be able to, but I was a little worried because we did have to do product testing on our new and most potent product that is coming out. So I was like, let's do the interview before. So yeah, we do that like any other consumer good. It's basically like you get into a boardroom and you crack the product and you taste it and you evaluate it on the look of it, the smell of it, the feel of it in your mouth, all of these kind of like sensory scorecards that we fill out. And then once you're good, that's the last stage before you release it to the public. And so I don't quite know how I muscled my way into this responsibility, but I quite enjoy it.
You're not going to share, are you? You're not going to share how we join these focus groups. I'm just trying to help here. I like to be on the forefront of product knowledge. Now, as the years pass by, there was not enough studies before, and so people that were coming out and saying there's all these negative things about cannabis. Has there been enough time yet in the market to, and there already was, proven facts that this is good for treatment of anxiety, of certain pain management. Are there any recent studies that people can look to? I know that on the Tweed Inc. website, for instance, they will release educational reports for people to read up on cannabis before they start. But has any studies come out recently to kind of quell people's fears that they might have about trying cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, there's new research all the time, and it's a plant that is studied an immense amount, and legalization is allowed for easier study because federal laws used to stand in the way. It used to be universities that have to apply for special grants to be able to get that stuff done, and so legalization is going to open up a whole industry around research and development and research around the consumption of the product. Like some of the things that I think were blind spots to researchers before was essentially people would not be willing to admit that they use cannabis because they were afraid to admit of illegal behavior. And so what we're seeing now is the addressable market in Canada is actually a little bit bigger than we thought it was, because more people are now saying that they're either doing it regularly or are now willing to try now that it's legal. And so a bit more time has to pass to see if there's any public health implications to that. But what I guess I would close by saying is that lots and lots of people were smoking cannabis for a very, very long time. And so the impacts of cannabis on society have been around us. And now it's just going to be a little bit easier to be able to define them and to publish those findings.
I think that's a good answer for what I asked, my friend. You're doing great here.
I mean, they pay me to do this. So
now I gotta ask, as an investor, I gotta ask, because I got pretty excited when you're not always around for a nascent industry to come onto the market suddenly. So I got in as it was a burgeoning industry. And I'm not going to say it hasn't been a roller coaster ride. I was hoping that there would be a little more straight up the first curve of the roller coaster. Now, as with demand going up recently, it has bounced back a bit. But could you give ballpark projections, or are they doing that in the industry for the next, say, 12 months? It's difficult to predict anything in the world right now, but is it on an upward trend from industry experts?
I mean, I guess what I would say is, like, we're a public company, so it's easy to follow our financials. Yeah. We actually report on Friday. And so we'll give, kind of guidance and stuff like that on the specifics at the end of the week. But in general, like we didn't set up this business as a get rich quick scheme. We set it up because we actually believe in the product and we believe in the market in the long term. And so it was pretty volatile there. Like that, you know, lots of emotion, lots of people trying to pile in. And I think that got us to a point where we really, that's what put us in that point where hitting those expectations was almost impossible, right? And that's proven to be true. Like it did take a little bit longer to get going than we thought, but we're still as confident on the long-term potential today as we were the day that Trudeau got elected. I remember like high-fiving some 50-year-old woman over a meatball recipe. I was so excited about it that day. Like that, and that excitement is still right there. Like we're still gonna, you know, deliver a really cool business. I just think it's going to be more rewarding for the people that look at this as a long-term investment rather than as something that, you know, they can buy and flip and get rich in a couple of days. That's just not our game.
Well, I mean, I wish we would have talked sooner. That's all. No, I'm in it for the long run now with what I have. You've got a new CEO, I guess, at the end of 2019, David Klein. It was
Yep.
founder Bruce Lipton. Can you speak to the? I don't even know if we need to know about the difference in leadership strategies, but I guess David came over from Constellation Brands, large beverage brand. How do you feel about the direction of Canopy Growth under? And it's tough. It's a tough question to ask. I know it's the CEO of your company, but you know, there seemed to be. Bruce was very, very aggressive in everything he did and optimistic. And, you know, I enjoyed watching any interview I saw with him. And the investors weren't as excited about that. So what would you say to people who are, you know, thinking of investing in Canopy Growth under the leadership of David Klein?
Yeah, I mean, David comes from a Fortune 500 company. And so there's a level of rigor of operating a business that I think was, you know, really due. Bruce was an amazing guy to work for, super exciting person. Like I still text him all the time and we've stayed in touch. But he really was the growth CEO. He was the guy that took it from a tiny little startup and he built it into a big business. I think the skill set that David's got is that he's used to operating a really big business. And so that kind of transition, it happens all the time in business. You know, you get 5, 6, 7 years with the CEO and it's time to pass the reins over. And so I think it was sort of a natural time for that to happen. We had left that hyper growth mode and now we're in operations mode. And so I think what you can expect from David and what I've gotten to really like about David is just the fundamentals. Like he's really good about just making sure that people are only focused on the stuff that's going to be good for the investor in the long term. And almost always that means what's the best thing for the customer. So I think it's good for people that want to buy our products, but it's also good for people that have trusted us with their own money as a steward of that investment.
Okay. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. Now, when we last talked, Snoop Dogg had just come into the game. We talked about Snoop a little bit. Now you got Seth Rogen. Are there other opportunities for being a Canadian company? You must want to have some Canadian celebrities in there. So should I send you my pitch directly for a Steve Patterson spinoff here? Or what? How do I get in on the game? You want some Canadian celebrities in on this, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some sort of comedy angle that we can get after here, but I think we've got a good roster, right? Like we've got not you said Snoop, you said Seth, and those
is Snoop still involved, by the way, or
is we still it's a similar arrangement as it was when we first signed the deal. You know, like we're essentially like we take genetics that he likes and we grow them on his behalf. And obviously we can only sell them in Canada right now.
Yeah.
But that's still alive and well. We're working with Martha Stewart and that's on
that's
products.
Snoop's buddy, Martha. Yeah.
That's where the intro came from. Yeah. And so we're working with her on some CBD stuff for the US. And then, you know, would be remiss if I didn't mention Drake, our Toronto buddy. And we're working with him too. So I think like between Snoop, Martha Stewart, Seth Rogen, and Drake, we've got a pretty compelling celebrity lineup.
Still no comedians though. So here's my pitch. So this show is the Steve Patterson Projecttt with 3 T's. The word's not spelled right at the end. Right. It wouldn't kill us to add HC at the end. The Steve Patterson Projecttt THC. It's just here to make you laugh and learn a little, you know? Will you take that back? Will you take that to Mr. Klein and let him know?
Yeah, yeah, we might need a couple more supporting documents, but it feels like we've got an idea, and then let's keep that ember alive.
I like that you didn't completely shoot me down. Keeping the hope alive is what this is all about. Thank you so much, Jordan, for joining me and for taking part in the panel with the good lovelies earlier. And I really hope something can come out of that too, as well, because they're good people, and you're good people too. So thanks for helping people through in this tough time with your product. And I'm sure we'll speak again soon, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, like all of my family is just enamored every time you like one of my tweets.
Oh,
And it
good.
doesn't mean I'm asking you to like more of my tweets, but it really does get a great response in the Sinclair household.
That alone will keep me going. That's almost like a money deal to me. Just keeping your family happy. Well, thank you very much, my friend. Thanks.
Okay.
And thanks for doing this. We'll talk to you again.
Yeah, awesome. See you.
Cheers.
And it's killing me.